another week older. Getting older all the time. So you can start again with a verse to reflect upon. This is from the sutras, the Buddha's speech.
Mic off.
Neme mirak sokyan dakmayan. Joa mirak. Neme mirak longshu dabmayan. Neme mirak joa dakmayan. Joa mirak sokyan dabmayan. Kiva mirak nigi nyangirna. To be anangawachitar kye. So that's Neme mirak longshu dabmayan. That's what the first one is. Neme mirak longshu dabmayan. So this freedom from sickness is impermanent, and youth is impermanent. Wealth is impermanent, and even life is impermanent. So when a being is endangered by impermanence, then where is there room to take joy in sense pleasures? This is, I find, helpful to reflect upon. Help us to get over our attachment to very transitory and, you can say, unfulfilling things that don't last. Of course, if there's nothing better, then maybe it's not. We may as well do what we can with the time we have. But if there's something better, then probably no need to be attached to these fleeting things. So this is the hope. This is why we study the LAM.RIM and the debate and try to. We try to generate some confidence that there is actually something better. This is one of the hardest aspects of the spiritual path. Sometimes it's not emphasized enough, I think. It's not just a matter of taking it on faith. We have to get some really strong sense that there is actually something that will be gained in the long run from all of this. That takes both a lot of sustained contemplation and reasoning and study, and also observing other examples. That's very helpful too. Right? So we were in the section here on the greatness of the teaching, right? The Dharma of the LAM.RIM teaching, which had 4 sections. So so you realize that all the teachings of the Buddha are non-contradictory. And so you realize that, or the greatness that all the instruction dawns as personal practice, or all of the teachings dawn as personal instruction. And then so you realize, easily find the intent of the conqueror, of the Buddha. You understand the meaning of the sutras. And then finally, Nichu Tamche Rangak Sugirwe Chewa. And so all the great fault, which is abandoning the Dharma, then it naturally ceases of its own accord. So this is understood to be naturally following from the first 3. If you understand that all the teachings are non-contradictory, then you won't have partiality towards some and bias, and partiality of liking some and not liking others. Thinking that some are worthwhile and some are just not actually to be adopted for your personal practice. So we have Nechu Tamche Rangak Sudrowe Chewa, Sudrowe Ni, it says here. So Padma Karpo, that's a Lotus Sutra, and Denpapo Leu, this is the chapter on morality. It's of a different sutra. It's Denpapo, which is truth speaker, but it's translated usually as chapter on morality, because it's about, of course, morality. It's, for example, Tsongkhapa's great text, the Jongjip Shunlam, which is his commentary on the Bodhisattva downfalls. He composed it at the same time he was composing LAM.RIM.CHEN.MO, actually, that same year that he was composing LAM.RIM.CHEN.MO. He composed a few other texts alongside that, which one of them was his commentary on Denpapo Leo, which is actually about the Bodhisattva vows. So as it says in those texts, Sangik ka tamche ngu tangyu pe sangewe ta tumpar makawar. So it's saying that all of the teachings of the Buddha either directly or indirectly, are for the purpose of attaining enlightenment. So that's what's been said, but there are some people who don't understand that point. So Gache, some people, Sangyewe Tap Tong, Gache here means some teachings. Gache Sangyewe Tap Tong, Gache Sangyewe Geksu Sune. So they hold that some teachings of the Buddha are methods for enlightenment, and some are obstacles to enlightenment. Geksu Sune Sangen Tong, Rig Mi Rig Tong, Tepa Che Chun to Che De. So they divide the good and the bad teachings, and the correct and the incorrect teachings, and then the greater and lesser vehicles. So this is an interesting point. Of course, we do generally divide the Buddha teachings of the Buddha into those that are great vehicle teachings and lesser vehicle teachings. But the point here is that we do so with the sense that the great vehicle ones are the ones that we adopt, and the lesser vehicle ones are to be discarded. This is the big danger. If His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he said this many times in public teachings, like the Kala Chakra. I remember, I think it was in 2016, he was talking about this. Would have been 2017, right? January 2017 during the Kala Chakra, right? It was the end of the year. He was saying that there's some people that they have this sense that they denigrate the Hinayana teaching. So they say that the people in Theravada, they're not practicing properly, and the people of the Mahayana, they practice properly. And he was saying, so what are you actually saying? Are you saying you're a bodhisattva? Are you thinking that you're a Mahayanist? So we have to be very careful. Just because a teaching is what our particular lineage practices doesn't necessarily mean we are embodying all of the ideals that it's espousing. So especially when we go around saying that our teaching is better than others, then it's quite hypocritical. So we have this division, dividing the teachings in this way. So, Jangzengi Dila Lop Gopal Dola, Dila Lop Migo So. So a bodhisattva should practice this and not practice this. She Dorja Zungne, so they hold some of the teachings as something to be discarded. If you do that, then Chupalmar Gire becomes abandoning the Dharma. So again, this is, I think I mentioned this before, we also have to be careful. It doesn't mean that we just accept everything that's said literally and accept all the teachings of the Buddha exactly as they appear, what they appear to say. And for one thing, we have to distinguish between which teachings are interpretable and which are definitive. So this means that some of the teachings, although they are skillful means, are not necessarily what we should be personally practicing. They were meant for a particular person, or they might not have, even the words might not be literal. They might, for example, we have the famous phrase that the Buddha taught, you probably heard, to Adrisatru, the Makhedra, the king who had murdered his father, and King Bimbasara, and taken the throne. So there's the story of how he was very difficult to tame. Of course, he was quite an unruly person, but at the same time, he had faith in the Buddha. And one time, after he had murdered his father, he was feeling great regret about this, and he happened to walk by the teaching of the Buddha, and the Buddha knew that he could hear him. So he said this verse, Padam Mani Sechashing. There's more to it, but I only know the first line because that's what we always quote it in debate. Padam Mani Sechashing. So your father and your mother are to be killed. So he heard that and he was kind of shocked, but it hit his mind, and he thought, okay. And then it helps to assuage his sense of regret, because he started thinking, well, what does the Buddha really mean? And then he gradually understood that he meant by pa and ma, mother and father, he meant craving and ignorance, or we sometimes craving and karma, right? The two links of dependent origination, being the second and the eighth link, that are the main impellers of future existence. So these are your mother and father. They cause you to be born in samsara. So this is what you need to abandon. But of course, the teaching isn't meant to be taken literally, that you should kill your mother and father. So we have to be very careful. That's a quite obvious one, but there are more, like I mentioned before. For example, the teaching saying that if you just recite the name of Amitabha Buddha, you'll be born in the Pure Land, is understood not to be taken literally. It's a skillful means to help people to feel encouraged. And then likewise, even if it is a sutra that can be taken literally, we have to be very scrutinize the meaning very carefully. It doesn't mean that in debate you just sit back and say, okay, it's what it is. It says in the sutra, so therefore I shouldn't question it. It really has to. If it's reasonable and true, then it should withstand scrutiny. But the danger is if we get to the point where we start saying this is just completely useless, and there's different kinds of doubt. We were talking about this, Jigjil and I, because in the book by Treatise, there's some talk about these points. It's interesting to see that there are at least four different words in Sanskrit that are translated into Tibetan as tetsum, as doubt. So you lose a lot of the nuance of these things. And what I was highlighting is these difference between these two verses. Like you have this verse by Vasu Bandhu, which is in Abhidhamma Kosha. Right, so it's Dromi Dotan Lam Nortang, Lam Tetsum Dinye Chik, Tarpa Jola Gekchepa, Dei Chiner Sundendo. So it's saying that there are three main obstacles to enter in the path to liberation. So Dromi Do means you don't want to go, which means that actually that's referring to the sense of a inherent self, that you think there's a real I, so you're resistant to entering a spiritual path because you think that this I will be annihilated if I change. So really it's saying you don't want to change. You want to stay in you like who you are now, and you're happy with the situation. So that's the first obstacle to entering the spiritual path. And the second one is Lam Nora, so you mistaken path. So that's talking about what we call Tultrum Chogzen, which means that you adopt a particular austerity or practice and hold to that as supreme, and then abandon other useful teachings or other practices. So that has two edges. There's the tulshu, which is like austerities, so that's like torturing yourself. And they give the example of the 5 fires. Some of you might have heard about in ancient India. This was a practice. You have the 5 fires, mean you sit in the middle. You have 4 fires on each direction, and the 5th fire is the sun. So you sit in the middle of that and torture yourself by experiencing the searing pain of the burning. Not that I don't think they actually set themselves on fire, but you experience the very intense heat. And the idea is you think you're going to purify your karma by doing that. So this is a mistake. This is Tultrum Chogzen. You hold that particular practice as supreme when it's not. And then Sultrum Chogzen is the opposite. So Tultrum is actually a good thing. It's morality. But you hold a particular moral conduct as supreme, and you denigrate people who do other kinds of spiritual practices. So you say that all this, being monastic or whatever, for example, and meditating, that's just a waste of time. People who do that, they're just a drain on society. I'm being a much more moral person by my lifestyle. Or you're a monk and you denigrate people who do more advanced practices because you say they're I uphold the Vinaya, for example. I don't eat in the evening, and these meditators that eat in the evening, well, then they're not actually proper practitioners, something like that. So you hold on to one basic point of the teaching, but you denigrate more advanced practices. So that's the second obstacle. You actually do want to be liberated, but you take the wrong path. And then the last obstacle is on the tetsum. So you have doubt about the path. So that's a big question. What does that mean? You have doubt about it, because that's contrasted to this verse by Aryadeva in the 400 stanzas, which I don't have memorized, but in English it's even towards this dharma, just to have a mere doubt, beings with inferior merit will not even have a slight doubt towards this dharma. Even just to have doubt towards the dharma can tear the fabric of samsara. So it's saying that doubt towards the dharma is actually very positive, and then without doubt you won't have any interest in the teaching. And likewise, Haribhadra says at the beginning of Dharmadhamsa, when you study Parchan, he talks about how there's the sharp faculty beings who enter through doubt. That's the ideal way to enter the teachings, the more stable way. Whereas the dull faculty, meaning the ones who just follow by faith, as opposed to with the reasoning, that they enter the teaching without having any doubt about it. So it seems quite contradictory there's that one text or two texts here are saying that doubt is essential for entering the path, and then one text is saying it's a big obstacle to the path. But they're obviously meaning something different. So there, as I said, there's 4 different words in Sanskrit. So what Hari Bhadra uses is a totally different word. I think it's sorry. Hari Bhadra is using samyasha. So that is actually one of the 16 categories of logic in ancient India. It's a necessary kind of inquiry into something. And then Aryadeva is using sandeha, which is a different word. We don't quite have a clear picture yet. Jigjal's been researching this of how we would exactly want to translate that. But this is a very loose translation. But in that context of Aryadeva, I would say it means curiosity. If you're curious about the teaching, that even that little bit is enough to shake samsara. You have some interest in it. Whereas then in Vasubandhu, he also uses samyasha, the category of logic. But then in his in the auto commentary, he says it's samyasha, which is motivated by vika. I can't pronounce it properly. Vikashita. Tididra will have to correct me later. So vikachita, something like that. That is the doubt that's one of the 6 root afflictions. So when you talk about the mental factor of doubt in the 6 root afflictions, that is something to be abandoned. So he's saying that. So I would translate our Vasubandhu as saying it's inquiry motivated by indecisiveness. So you're just asking endless questions because you just can't make up your mind or make a firm decision. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to follow this path. And actually, it was interesting. Chogyam Trungpa, in his commentary on Abhidharma, which we have here, he says it should be translated as it's a sense of not having enough security in yourself. So it's a sense of like, I can't do it. I'm not able to follow this path. So you keep questioning it. So it's a very different thing. What we want to abandon and then what we want to adopt, but it's even in English, because they're all translated into English as doubt, and there are different meanings of doubt. Some people would say doubt is an excellent quality, to have doubt about things, and some people would say it's a very bad quality, or in different contexts we use the word differently. So I'm just bringing that up because it's quite important in this context of abandoning the Dharma. You can go to either extreme. You can go to this extreme of being cynical about it and just saying that this is probably useless and I'm not really interested. And you can go to the extreme of just accepting it without any questioning and not actually examining what is worthwhile, which this is what Hari Bhadra is saying. That's unstable in the end. That will lead to a less stable kind of faith in the teaching than one that is arrived to through personal inquiry and questioning. So here we have, it becomes abandoning the Dharma if you have this kind of partiality towards the teachings. So nambar takpa tamshidu sorry, the sutra that combines all, nambar takpa is like all weaves, all the threads. I think maybe it's translated because takpa is to weave something together. So the sutra that combines all threads. So Jampeo, Dambechu, Pongwei Legi, Dripani, Trawoho. So Manjushri, the karma of abandoning the Dharma, the obscuration that is the karma of abandoning the Dharma, or it's a karmic obscuration is the best way to translate that. This is subtle, right? It's considered a karmic obscuration, it's called. That when you have this karmic obscuration, then you're not able to see the quality of the Dharma in this lifetime, so you can't enter the path. It's subtle, he's saying. Jampeo, gang deshin jekbe sumpe kalani, lalani, samwadu jela. So those people who, regarding the speech of the Tathagata, they hold that some teachings, they discriminate that some teachings are excellent. Lalani, nyemberdu jepani. So they hold that some teachings are inferior or like bad. So that is abandoning the Dharma. Gang Chu Pongwa De, so the one who abandons the Dharma, Chu Pongpe, so through abandoning the Dharma, Dejin Chepa La Kora de Bayin. So through that, then they denigrate the Tathagata. Gendin Layang, Ngendu Jupa, and they speak negatively of the Sangha. So Dini, Rikbaho. Dini, Mirikbaho, Shestena, Chupamaho. So when they say this is correct, this is incorrect, that becomes abandoning the Dharma. Dini, Donda Seba Namgi Chedu Sumpaho. Dini, Nindu Namgi Chedu Sumpaho. So this was taught for bodhisattvas. This was taught for hearers, Shravakas. Shestena, Chupamaho, that's also abandoning the Dharma. And then Dini, Rang Sangya Namgi Chedu Sumpaho. Shestena, Chupamaho. And also this was taught for Praitika Buddhas. Dini Danda Seba Nangi Lapa Yeno. This is a training of Bodhisattva. She Sene Cho Pongwa Yeno. That's also abandoning the Dharma. She Sumso. Cho Pongna De Niepa Shindu Chiwani. So if you abandon, this is the Tsongkhapa talking again now. Abandoning the Dharma, the first stanza, the first quotation was just talking what is abandoning the Dharma. So this one is saying what is the heaviness? It's a very heavy fault to abandon the Dharma. As it says in the thing is in Gyalpo Do, so the King of Concentration Sutra. Gangi Zambu Lingdirni, so whoever on this earth, this Jambudvipa continent, Choden Tamji Shikjepe, so the person who would desecrate or destroy all the stupas in this world. Gangi Dode Pongchepe Dikpa Deni Chekepa. Compared to the person who abandons the Sutra Pitaka, then this negativity is far worse, or really it's far superior, but the point is it's far worse. So Gange Cheniki, so as many sands of grains of sand as there are in the Ganges, Jacham Sepa Girwawaye, so the one who kills as many arhats as there are grains of sand in the Ganges. Gangi Dode Pongchepe, Dikpa Deni Chekepak. So again, the one who abandons the Sutra Pitaka, their negativity is that much greater. She Sungso. So Chir Chupong Juma La Go Mandu Naya. Chupong Juma La Go Mandu Naya. So although in general there are many ways, many doors, it's saying, many ways that you can end up abandoning that it come about that you abandon the Dharma. Ngar tempe go di cheshu sunawe beber power chow. So the door that was taught earlier is the greatest one. It appears to be the greatest one, so make effort to abandon it. So it seems the one he's saying taught earlier is when you discriminate certain teachings as superior and inferior. Deyang ngar tempatar, so as I taught before, ngar tempatar gi nyepa nyepa samgi. So if you gain the kind of ascertainment or certainty that I talked about before, meaning that you ascertain all the teachings are non-contradictory and that all the teachings dawn as personal practice. So when you find that kind of thing, then merely through that, that alone turns away abandoning the Dharma. So therefore this great fault halts of its own accord. So that kind of ascertainment or certainty, so you should look to see where it says this in this chapter on morality and this the Lotus Sutra. So all other doors or all the really means of abandoning the Dharma, you can understand from this sutra that combines all threads. Also, it's just mention this comes up in the first chapter of the third chapter of Chandrakirti's text on the Umadajukpa Madhyamakavatara, and then in the commentary by Tsongkhapa, because there's this talk about different negativities have different results, and one thing about anger, right? So like a negativity like desire attachment, it has its own negative karma that you accumulate, but it doesn't harm your previous roots of virtue. whereas anger does. So anger has in and of itself, it's a negative action, but furthermore, acting out of anger, it will destroy your previous collection of virtue. And likewise, he gives us several other examples of things that do that, and one of them is abandoning the Dharma is another karma you create that in and of itself is negative, but it also then that destroys or undermines your previous collection of virtue. So now we've come to a new section, right? We had the greatness of the teaching and the greatness of the teacher. First, the teacher, the greatness of the teacher, the greatness of the teaching. So now we have Chewani. So with those two greatnesses, the greatness to teacher and teaching. Chewani dan dembe chula nienche jira chawala sum. So the way of listening and explaining the Dharma that has those two greatnesses. Right. So this we're getting to the going back to the very first page in terms of the divisions of the text. Yeah, so that's actually that is the root we say root outline, right? And then he'll go on to explain the teaching, but there's no other more fundamental outline than this one. So it starts with this the manner of listening and teaching this Dharma with the two greatnesses. So first, nyepetsu, shepetsu. So the way of listening, the way of explaining it. And juktu tumongdu chawetsu. And the latter part, the practice is common to both of those, to both teaching and explaining. To listening and explaining. So dalbolasum, the way of listening, chu tupe peyon sampa. So thinking about the benefits of hearing the Dharma. Chu tang chu mawal rimjo-kepa. So the way of I say pleasing is not the right word. The way of behaving respectfully towards the teaching and the one who teaches it. And nyepetsu ngu, so the actual way of listening. So first, thinking about the great benefit of hearing the teaching. So dambo ni tupetsam, right? Sorry. Som is often in English we call Dhammapada. That's the Pali, right? Dharmapada in Sanskrit. So chedu jupe tsam. So it means the collected sayings of the Buddha. Dharmapada I'd never seen in Tibetan. It would be chu shat, right? The feet of the Dharma. But they don't use that term in Tibetan. They use tsom. So tsom for short. There's the collected. And chedu jupe tsam, the collected sayings. So it has chapters, right? There's one chapter on hearing, the benefits of hearing. Personally, I like tsom quite a lot. Maybe you do too. It's very nice sayings of the Buddha. So it's good if you can find some of those that you particularly like, and you can try to memorize them or post them on your wall or whatever is useful for you. But a lot of them are quite inspiring. So there's this chapter here on the benefits of hearing the teaching. So, really, benefits of what did he say? Yeah, the benefits of much learning is probably the best way to put it. So, tepe chona sheper gyur. So, with hearing, you know many dharmas. Tepe dikle doparche. So, with hearing, you turn away from negativity. Tepe don mayimper pon. So, with hearing, you abandon what is wrong, what is incorrect. So with that you attain nirvana. Shetam jitar kimni lek yokpa mube kepe nang shukpa. So in the way that a householder who is well covered, and then he enters into a place that is obscured by darkness. Mube kepe nang shukpa sunayopa gyurkyang ni. So although there's many forms there, mikden shindu mi tongwa. So he doesn't see well in the person, like a person who has good eyes. Oh, sorry, mikdan shindu. Oh, no, that doesn't mean. Mikden shindu means although he has. So he has eyes, but he doesn't see, because his eyes are covered and the place is very dark. Dejin dina rikewe mini lojo dengir kyang. So therefore, likewise, a person who is born into a noble lineage, and he has intelligence. Dikpa tani gewichu tupa dushi migiro. So that he's not able to distinguish what is because he doesn't have much learning. He's not able to distinguish what is a correct and incorrect dharma, or virtuous, non-virtuous. Mikten marme yupa hi sunan tongwa jitabwa. Dejin gedan dikpechu tupe number shipur. So then the person who, like a person who has eyes and has a lamp, and they clearly see all forms, likewise in the same way, the person who is endowed with much learning can understand what is virtuous and non-virtuous. I remember Lama Zorbushe said something about that. It was asked, what is the benefit of all this study? And he said, well, the more study you have, the more you're able to distinguish what is a virtuous thought and non-virtuous thought. So when the thoughts arise in your mind, you don't fall under their power. Oftentimes we can have all kinds of ideas. I should do this, do that. But once you had a lot of both experience and learning, then you're much more able to distinguish what is really actually a good thing to do with you, and what is a mistaken idea. Otherwise, we see this. People who are very young or very new to the teachings can get carried away by all kinds of ideas, thinking that it's virtue. You think that this is the right path. It's like I said before, that you go take the wrong path because you just don't have enough understanding, discrimination that comes from wisdom gained over a lot of time. So then Kirap. So Kirap is the Jataka tales, right? Kirap is the string of birth. So again, I think Jataka is probably Pali. I don't know how it would translate into Tibetan, but maybe Yajikta will tell me later. But it is in Tibetan it's Kirap, just the garland of birth. So Ganshi Tupe Ini Degirne Lekbar Gala Dembani Dukyur. So the person whose mind has gained faith through hearing, through study, lekbar gala, dempanidugyur. So they'll be very happy and very stable. Shudap kijing tikpa mepargyur. So they'll generate much wisdom, and their ignorance will fall away. Rangi shekyang deni nyewe.
No way.
Oh, no way, but shake it. Don't you know we So the she, there's no drembu. Is there a drembu in yours? Rangi she kyang? No. So it's she, and then it doesn't mean no unless it's a typo. Then it would mean she, like one's part. They need nyowirik. So one's part, one is the lineage of the ones who sell nyowa. Let me see. It's a bit odd construction. Yeah. I see. So the sha say it's a sha. Sha is sha, like it's meat, one's flesh, right? And the sa is a is a chedra, right? It makes it a active verb or active noun, the actor. So through that one's flesh becomes suitable to buy. That's that. Yeah. Oh, I see. One is shekan. That makes more sense. It's worth buying with your own flesh. Rangi shekyan dini nyo. Yeah. Okay. So then, it's a bit odd. It should be nyowar rik, not nyowei rik. And nyowei rik is like the class of what is bought, but nyowar rik means like suitable to buy. Nyowar rik. So it's suitable to buy with your own flesh. It's saying that, to have the great hearing is suitable to buy with your own flesh. Yeah. Yeah, I'm saying it should nyowarik I would translate it as reasonable to buy. Nyowerik is a bit odd. It sounds like it's saying the class of buying is of the class to buy. But nyowarik, it is suitable to buy with your flesh. So tupa timuk monsel dromayin. So hearing is a lamp that dispels the darkness of ignorance. So it's the supreme wealth that cannot be carried off by thieves. So it's a great weapon that destroys the enemy of ignorance or of confusion. And then Tapsul Mengak Dunpe Jogi Chok. So it is the Supreme's friend in showing you the advice about what is the proper way to behave. Tapsul. So Pongwa Girkyang Migir Zaoyin. So although you become very impoverished, it is an unchanging friend. Right? Most friends might abandon you when you're in dire straits, but this friend does not change. Always your friend. So it is the medicine that for the sickness of misery. It's a harmless medicine, right? It doesn't have side effects. So then also it is the great army that destroys the army of false. So also it is the supreme of its supreme fame, the supreme glory, the supreme treasure. Yarat nam tang trena kigichok. So when you meet with virtuous people, yarat means those who follow moral behavior. Yarat trena kigichok. So then you are a supreme being among them. Sugi nauna kipagur gyur. So when you're in a crowd of great, when you're in a crowd, then it pleases great scholars. They're pleased by who you are. Shaitan, so again, this is just later in the text. This one. Tobe jeju drubani poche kepe zonek so me sekme tarbagyur or sekchung tarbagyur. Right. So after having done much hearing, tope jeju drupani poche, then engage in the essence of accomplishment. Kiwe zonle sekching tarbagyur. So then you will easily be freed from the fortress of birth. And so it's saying that this verse is often quoted because it's saying the importance of, before you engage in extensive meditation practice, to first have a lot of hearing. Because when you do so, then you will, without difficulty. Sekchung means like without having to undergo a lot of hardship. Whereas sekchen is like when you're pushing a boulder up the hill, you're working against gravity. But when you have sekchung, it's like it just comes very naturally. You'll easily just be freed from the fortress of birth, the cycle of birth. So she sumpe tove penyo namla ning tapene mubakedo. So in that way, then you should generate from the depths of your heart a great aspiration or faith in all the great benefits of hearing. Zhenyang sange zhongwa Galam na yinching. So the arising of a Buddha is very rare. Galam na yinching. It's like it happens in 100 paths. It happens only once in a long time, is the point. Galam. De che kyang de randrawe. So likewise, the Buddha's Dharma is difficult to meet with. It only comes once in a while. So Kympe Dengi Rinpoche Dushetang. So these are the 5 discriminations that are talked about by Asanga in the Bodhisattva Bhumi. Right? So there's a discrimination that the teaching is like a jewel because it's very rare to find in the world. There's also another quote. I think it's also from Tsom, right? The Dhammapada. So it's Mini Rabdutopka de Chiwanamna Ngipraka Dampechuni Topaka Sanginani Jumaka. So this is the 4 things that are rare to find. So it's very hard to find birth as a human. And for those who are certain to die, it's very hard to stay long. And the Dharma is very hard to find. It's something that it's very hard to hear. It's very hard to hear the Dharma, or very rare to hear the Dharma, and it's very rare for a Buddha to arise in the world. We had this online discussion a few months ago during Sake Duchen. There was a couple of us from Sera J and then some monks from other countries. So there were some Theravada monks, and one of them was talking about that same verse. So they obviously have that also in their canon. He was talking about the four hardships, the things that are very hard to arise in the world. So then trail do lenchi kepe shet up. So lenchi kepe shet up. So that's like naturally arising wisdom that just comes once in a while. Trail do lenchi kepe shet up. Je cher kepe migi du shetan. So the discrimination of it is like an eye, because when it comes, it just you want it to become greater and greater. Je cher kewe. So you want to keep enhancing that like an eye. And a shereki make jimpa de kyang. So also being granted this eye of wisdom. Jitawatan. Jinyepa nam tongwar gyurwe. So then you see what is jitawa and jinyepa, which means conventional and ultimate truth. Jitawa and jinyepa nam tongwar gyurwe. Nao edushe. So the discrimination like illumination. And then tar nyangle depatam. Janda sempe dribu terwe. So ultimately it gives the results of nirvana and great enlightenment. So payon chewedushe. So the discrimination of it having great benefit. And then tanda ne kyang. So even right now, de nigi gu jineta laktangi dewa topar chepe. Even now, it helps you to attain the two causes of great enlightenment, which is calm abiding and special insight. Kanamatoa me pedushe. So you have the discrimination of it being faultless. Like kanamatoa means negative action. So it's not negative, it's faultless. So with these five, Nyeng Gubar, so you need to listen with those five in mind when you listen to the Dharma teaching. So you have the discrimination of it being like a jewel, of it being like eyes, of it being like illumination, of it being of great benefit, and of it being faultless. So that you should do that, as it says in Jangsa, right? Just Asanga's text, the Bodhisattva Bhumi. Jangsa le sumpatar sempani tupe peyo sempaho. So it's saying when it's saying that within there, you should contemplate. What is it saying? You should contemplate the benefits of hearing. So then we had right. So the first one was what intention you should listen, or what state of mind. And now we had Chodan Choma, although Rimjo Jidar Kepa, right? So the proper way to behave towards the Dharma and towards the one who expounds the Dharma. So Rimjo, right? Rimjo, it basically means like a ritual, but it also can mean just kind of proper behavior. You'll see this often in the text, Rimjo. So Sai Nipo Dole. So in the Kshitigarbha Sutra, right? Sai Ningpo is Tibetan for Kshitigarbha, the Bodhisattva, one of the 8 main bodhisattvas. Chiktu de ching gupe chunying chube gupe chunying gi chiktu. So with single pointed faith and with respect, listen to the Dharma. De la cha shing korami chaho. Do not mock it or denigrate it. Cha is like what's the word in English? It's one of the vows, right? You have the Getsul vows, Sheng or Chawatang, right? You have the Getsul vow of mock is not quite the right word there. Like Sheng, what?
Trivialize?
What?
Trivialize?
No. It means like so. Like in the context of the Getsul vows, which of course you have memorized, right? The Sheng or Chawa.
Don't think it's lower.
What's that?
Don't think it's lower than another.
No. Sheng or She means friend, right? And Ngor means side of. And Chawa, so it's like, I mean, in that case, it really means like accusing, but it means like, so there's somebody in the Sangha who is in charge of distributing the food. And he gives, I mean, from your perception, it's not true, but in your perception, he's giving all the nice food to this one Kangzen, and the other Kangzen, he just gives terrible food. So you accuse him, what's it called in English? They say accusing of not partiality. They use a different word in the...
Bias.
Yeah, something like that. There's a better translation.
Favor, like favoritism.
Yeah, favoritism. Alleging favoritism, that's what they call it. Alleging favoritism. But chawa, it means like you kind of mock him, but it's not just quite mocking. It's like there's not alleging is not really the right word either. In that context, it is, but chawa it has a connotation like in colloquial Tibetan chalegya. Chalegya means to make fun of somebody. Yeah, chalegya. So that's the same cha. And then so dela chashing korami chaho. So then you denigrate. Do not denigrate or sort of make light of the teaching, make fun of the teaching. Chumawala chupachawani. So as for making offerings to the one who expounds the teaching, sangye drawa dela dushike. So then generate the discriminating factor of them as the Buddha. Right? This very line, sangye drawa dela dushike. This is quoted in Kadda Bachidon, right, in the Jorlam section. In Jorlam, at the end of Jorlam, you have the section on Yongzin, the teacher, right, and it talks about how to behave towards the teacher. So it says that Sangye Drawa Dela Dushe Ke. So I remember Gengawan Sangye, he was saying here, you have to understand, it says Dushe doesn't mean Kelen, right? In Tibetan, you have Kelen. It's like you don't have to believe that the teacher is a Buddha. Like you don't hold the point in debate trying to defend that they're a Buddha. Because you don't know somebody else's mind, and they may or may not be. But dushe means discrimination, that you have the discriminating factor that you imagine that they are, and you treat them in that way, and that helps to generate respect. And then if they are a Buddha, you gain a lot. You have nothing to lose from doing that. So that's an important point. It's not about trying to convince yourself. Although you try to train your mind to think a certain way. I like the example of an actor, right? So if we're acting in a play or a movie, I have to generate the discrimination of you as a particular person. If I think that you're Tempa, and I can't discriminate that actually you're the actor, the person that you're playing the part of, then it's going to be very hard to act properly. But I have to constantly think of you as that particular person and act towards you in that way, rather than just talking to you like the person that I normally know or think of. So it's the same thing in the monastery. It's not just the teacher. It's like all the roles of the monks. With the senior monks, you discriminate them as a senior person. It's just a matter of you don't necessarily know anything about their mind. It's just a matter of we all play a particular role. That you play a role of a junior or play a role of a senior, and that is very helpful for everyone's development. Of course, we know ultimately there's nothing substantial about it, but it's very important, what kind of dushe we have. It's the same thing for anything else. Right? We have the President of the United States. It's just a dushe. It's just that everyone holds that this person is the president. There's nothing inherently about them, so it makes a big difference what particular discriminating factor we have towards a particular person that affects how we treat them. And then you see them and you think, wow, I met the president. This is something exceptional. I remember this for my entire life. So, she is sumpatar. So, as it says in that sutra, Sangye tan drawa tela. So you view him or her as like a Buddha. Sangye trila sope kordi tan nipe. So you have kordi is like showing reverence, and nyepa, or also veneration, and nyepa is like offerings. So you, in things like that, like putting them on a lion throne, and so forth. Che de magupar pangshing. So therefore, you abandon disrespect towards the Dharma. So jangsale. So as it says in the Bodhisattva Bhumi, kuni nyamopa me patang chu mawala nengar ila cha. The cha was sumso. So without affliction, right? Kuni nyamopa me patang. And then with the chu mawala nenga. So nenga ila cha mila mi cha. So don't view the teacher. So don't view the teacher with affliction as the first point, and then with the five ne, the five sources really ne nga. So it says at the end. It'll explain below what are the ne nga, what are the five. So first of all, with kuni nyoho mepa, so without affliction, it's describing what each individually of these are. So kempa tandrawa, right? So without kempa haughtiness. King, it's related to the word dang, like to be full. So full of oneself. Kempa. Kingpa Andrawani, Dusu Nyampatang, Kordi Chepatang, so listening at the right time, showing reverence. Ne Caesar Chepatang, Mitrowatang, so then showing respect, Siju. And then Mitrowa, not being angry. Tang, Jesu Drupatang, so then practicing in the way it's been taught. Then Lenka Mitsoa, not seeking faults in the teaching. Druki Nyempo, so you should listen with those 6 things, right? So listening at the right time, showing reverence, showing respect, reverence. I said the same thing for both words, right? Kurti, and Zishu. I think Kurti is going to mean like actually more your actions, the way that you set up the throne and everything, and then Siju is more related to the way your attitude of respect. I would guess in this case. And then Mitroa, so without anger, and then thinking that you're going to practice the way it's done, and then Lenka Mitso, not fault finding, not seeking faults in it. So listen with those 6. Kizigi Nyomon Tandro, that's the first, is without those first 6 are related to being puffed up, Kengpa, or haughty. And then Kesugi Nyomon, so the Nyomon, the affliction of Kizu, which is like to denigrate. Kizugi Nyomon Tandro, so being free of the affliction of denigration. Chu Tang, Chu Mawala Gupatang, Denila Kidu Misopaho. So simply have respect towards the teacher and the teaching and not denigrate them. And then Ne Nga Yilamichawani. So then without the 5 Ne, so the 5 sources or 5, it could just mean 5 things. Ne is quite broad in its meaning. So Sulcham Yampata. So without broken ethics or deteriorated ethics. And a Rikpa Mao, without low. Oh, I see. Yeah, so this is the way you might view the teacher as having these 5 faults, is the idea. So Ne here is talking about fault. I mean, literally means like a source, like a sort in that sense, like a source of disrespect or not wanting to listen to the teachings. So you think that the teacher is of deteriorated ethics or of a low lineage, Rikmamawa, and a Cheng-Empa. So Cheng-Empa is going to mean like bad black magic. I wonder how they translate that. I see. Che here is Che-Jin. It's not Che. The word Che by itself can mean like magical spell. But Che is like Che-Jin, means their face, right? So they're ugly, is the idea. Cheng-Empa. And they Sik-Jung-Empa. So they use bad words. None of them means like foul language, but there's that they don't speak eloquently. Sik-Jung-Empa. And a Sik-Sup-Ching. So that last one is a sort of harsh word. Sik-Sup-Ching, or coarse language. Sik-Sup-Ching Minyepa, and not very pleasing to the ear. So maybe they speak in a colloquial dialect when you're used to listening in the high, the Queen's English. Nyempa Mawe, Minyempa Mawe. So Mawe Dila Minyano. Yeah, so they don't listen with those. So Nyampa, I see. Mawe Dila Minyano Nyampa Doro. So abandon the thought, I will not listen because the speaker has those faults. Of course, if they are of deteriorated ethics, that might be a good reason to consider withdrawing from the teaching. But probably the point is that they aren't actually deteriorated ethics. You just hold that as a fault when it's not true. And then Kebe Raple Kyang. So as it says again in the Tataka tales, the birth garland stories. Rabdu Mawe Tenladuk. So he sits upon a very a very low throne. Yeah, Rabdu Mawe Tenladuk. Due Perne Namprake. So if you sit upon a low seat, is the idea. If you sit upon a low seat, then the glory of your having been subdued will increase. So if you take the lower seat, you'll have a much more ability to subdue your mind. Ga tan dembe migita. So look with eyes of joy. Siki dutsi tungwajin. So as though you're drinking nectar. Right? This is the idea. When you listen to the Dharma, you should have a sense of I'm receiving something very precious. Gupa Keching, Sechi, Du. So then generate respect and single pointed Du is like, I mean, literally means bow, right? So bow single pointedly, but I think it's like, yes, respect here. We're trained to think a lot of the words is respect. We'd have to have some time to look in the thesaurus for better ways to. There's many different words in here in Tibetan that have subtle differences in terms of meaning respect or reverence. Rabdu dang la chime yi. So with a mind that is rabdu dang means like very clear mind, and with dreame, so without any stain. Nepe mempe tsikmianshin. So the way that a sick person listens to the words of a doctor. Rimdro kede chunyonchik. So in that way, perform the ritual, but really, the proper etiquette or manners for listening to the Dharma. So listen to it in that way. She sumpataro. Okay, so that's the first of all, how to we had the first two sections here, right? So how to listen to the Dharma was first how to think about the Dharma and think of yourself in relation to the Dharma, and then about the proper etiquette. I think etiquette might be the best way to put it, Rimdro. The best etiquette towards listening to the Dharma. So next we have actually how to listen to the Dharma. So we'll have to leave that, I think. We can have some questions and answer, which last week went quite long. And then we do the prayers. So does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Mm.
So there seems to be some like contradictory advice, or that don't accept everything on faith for the teachings, but then also don't. But then we're being told not to discard anything. So should we approach or listen to the teachings more with kind of like a neutral, a neutral state of mind, as to being like open to the teachings, and then we scrutinize, but in like, how do we do this, like in a respectful way?
Yeah, that's a very difficult point, honestly. I remember early on, because when I was first thinking about what tradition I wanted to follow early on, I had already decided, quite early, when I was about in 1920, I wanted to be a monk, but I still hadn't decided certainly that I was going to do that in the Tibetan tradition. So I was fortunate, Venerable George Chernoff, who you might know. No, he's one of the old students of Lama Atisha, one of the first monks in FPMT. He's still a monk now. He came to Boston for quite a while during my second year of college, and to stay at Kurokula Center, and I went and talked to him quite a lot. And I was asking him about some of my doubts about the Tibetan tradition, all these, a lot of things that just didn't make sense to me. And he had this analogy of like a buffet, that when you're a little child and you go to a buffet, and there's a lot of food that look really tasty, but there's some like spinach, like who would want to eat that? But you see, well, look, some people are really enjoying it, and maybe rather than just saying this is, not to use a bad term, but this is something I don't want, then you just say, well, it doesn't taste good to me now, maybe I'll develop a taste for it. So likewise, with a lot of these teachings, it takes time to develop some kind of appreciation of them. Of course, the other, as I said, the other thing, first of all, is what if some of them are wrong? We don't know until we know. What if it actually is incorrect? Right? But early on, I wondered, because a lot of people say, well, Tibetan Buddhism, for example, you'd heard these things. Well, it was really just a mix of the bone religion and the native shamanistic religion in Tibet was kind of got mixed in with a lot of Buddhist teachings, and it's not really teachings of the Buddha. And I didn't know, and if you don't know, well, you don't want to end up in the wrong path, of course. And so you have to examine it. But I think it's a very subtle thing in terms of how you approach that. You have to be very careful of Rinpoche often said that, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that our minds can play tricks on us. You have to be very, very careful. It can make you think that something that is actually worth adopting is something to be discarded, and something that's actually you discard is something worth adopting. So I think part of it is developing the ability to not, to live with uncertainty. That's a very hard skill. It's not, we like to have, I know how everything is and everything makes sense. But sometimes it's not like that. I mean, I know one aspect of this teaching is, of course, the debate system and the study system. And for me early on, that was very challenging. I had the view when I was in college that I'm tired of all this study. I've been studying since I was a young child, and it's just brought me anxiety, and I'm not sure if it's really the right way I want to live my whole life. It would be nice to have more peace of mind and just live in the moment rather than so much abstract conceptual thinking, which is a common approach to Buddhism in the West, which is understandable because we do have there's too much information. It's like you're bombarded with all this media all the time. So you think of Buddhism, you can just go to this religion that allows you to be free of all these concerns and just not fill your mind with all these things. So that it was a challenge to think about why would I want to join this 20-year study program. And even when I first came to Sera, it was a major challenge, and I would say obstacle, but it wasn't like it was. Fortunately, it wasn't something that was going to make me leave. It's a good thing that I addressed it rather than just ignoring it. But it took a lot of time to start to see the value of it. But my approach when I got here was, okay, this is how it's appearing to my mind. I can't deny that. Whether it's true or not, I have to really examine closely, because I did recognize there's some things that don't quite line up. It's not so obvious that this is useless. For example, my teacher Choden Rinpoche, who I had extraordinary respect for, and I thought this is the kind of person I want to be. Well, he went through this program, so there's obviously, it doesn't quite line up to say this is just useless if that's exactly what he did and he ended up this way. So you have to look, not just focus so much on it appears to me right away as useless. So then there's more difficult aspect to the teachings, of course, tantric teachings especially, which unless you're at a very advanced level, it's very hard to see it directly relating to your mind. And even things like teaching with an emptiness, like Gen Tabge, from Hamdang Kangsen. He said quite clearly, which is interesting because he was, the top scholar in the Gelong Kikcho. He was by very long margin. He was the number one Gache, 6 years in a row in the exams, and he basically said that, for him, it's emptiness. Meditation and emptiness doesn't really affect his afflictions very much. That it's an intellectual, maybe some intellectual understanding, but in terms of dealing with his afflictions, he has to do other kinds of meditation. So if that's the case for him, then how much more for somebody who doesn't have any intellectual understanding of it. So we have to, for a lot of people, that as I say, there can be the one extreme of just kind of having this dogmatism about emptiness and saying that, of course, emptiness is the antidote to all afflictions, because that's what it says in the texts. And then the other extreme is kind of denigrating that and saying that is not, well, it doesn't help me. I don't understand how thinking of things is empty is going to get rid of my afflictions. But then sort of the approach we have here is that, first of all, intellectually, we can have some understanding of it, and we can see how this could be useful. And then also the example of many teachers who say that there's only a Dalai Lama saying that his meditation and emptiness, it helps him tremendously in dealing with his mind and so forth. So it's like you have to approach it in a very mature way, I think I would put it, is the best way to think of it. It's like both of those extremes I talked about are kind of the way that immature people approach things, where they just immediately seize upon one, and I think this is they don't have a lot of experience of seeing the nuance of things. That's something that comes with maturity.
So
Yeah.
Like approaching it with kind of a neutral judgment.
Yeah, and being very, very honest about what I do and don't know, and of all the different nuances. Like it's not all. I can see the good and the bad in this. I can see that, like I said, seeing that, well, there are all things about this study program that are challenging to me, but at the same time, it's not 100% obvious to me that this is not useful, because there are definitely signs that it is. So not just this kind of discarding those or just turning a blind eye to them, which is what happens when people get very focused on one answer as this is the thing. And as I was starting to say about Tantra also, that's something we also have to be very careful how we approach it, because again, it's something that's very strong in this tradition, and it's understood that in Tibet, the monks were not allowed to take tantric empowerments until they became Gache, or to attend tantric teachings. It's quite different now, and it's like all these things are out in the open and everybody knows about it, which is just how it is. But it's important to recognize that's how it was approached originally, that this is something that can only really be understood when your mind is very developed, and to kind of have both confidence in that, but at the same time not just blind faith in it, to keep examining it and questioning it. So I don't know if I give a direct answer to your question, but I think, like honesty and maturity are two qualities that I think are very helpful in approaching that. And I think also I mentioned before about there's the whole historical element, which is quite difficult, because this tradition does not really address that very much, because they didn't know about it. I mean, it's just how things are. There was no method of examining history in that time, where we have now. We have a lot more recourse to a lot more evidence, and so that can be very challenging, because a lot of the traditional ways of viewing the source of these teachings can be challenged by historical evidence. So, as I said before, I don't think we should just ignore that. We have to be honest about this. This is what it appears to be according to evidence, and recognize. It's like they say the reliance is you rely on the Dharma and not the speaker and all these things. That what's important is that is not necessarily where it historically came from, but whether it's true. But at the same time, where it historically came from has a big bearing on how seriously we take something. But I don't think it's good to just kind of say that is that you should just believe exactly the way that it's always presented. That there could be, because exactly that's what Tsongkhapa did. If we look at him, it's like nowadays in the Gelong, we have this kind of party line, I would say, of this is historically what happened in India, but that's based on Tsongkhapa's interpretation. Tsongkhapa rejected what most Tibetans believed at the time. He was known for going back to the Indian sources and rejecting a lot of the interpretations that had been made by Tibetans, which was quite controversial at the time. For example, there was this text Shungchel Nojong, which you'll come to in Parchen, which. The Jonangpa school, which had arisen just before Tsongkhapa, had considered this one of the most important Indian texts, so it was central to their philosophy. And Tsongkhapa criticized strongly their understanding of the text, and saying that you're wrong about who wrote this. It was not written by Vasubandhu as you think it was. So he said, historically, your information about where this text came from is incorrect.
I think it's because after the dissemination of after Langdama destroyed a lot of the teachings, there was a lot of false translations or kind of like bogus kind of or misinterpretations. So he reviewed a lot of
there was a lot of that. I think with Shungchel Nojam, he wasn't challenging the translation per se. And even in India, there had been a tradition of thinking that Vasubandhu composed it. It looks like. But he was there. But as to your point, there were other things that he was challenging. There's He looked at what historical evidence was available to him at the time, and used that to inform his interpretation of Indian texts. So I don't think it's in any way antithetical to his teaching if we now have more historical evidence to bring that to bear on our understanding, even if it wasn't available to him at the time, and say, well, we can't accept it because it's not, how he took it. Yeah, I mean, he has there's the quotation from him in Trangyalek Shinpo when his main thing is that if it's not the tradition, he says it's not the tradition of the Indian scholars. When you come upon a teaching that contradicts the teaching you already accept, if you just say, well, the Buddha didn't teach this, and you discard it, what is it exactly? His point is that you need to be open to challenges you have to look at all the different evidence available, and not just hold strongly to one side. The tradition of the Indian scholars was to examine things very closely and not be so certain in your view of how it is based on the tradition. And that was also what the Buddha said. Of course, there's the famous quotation in the Pali Canon when he comes. There's the Brahmin boy who's questioning about what to accept, not accept, and he says all these reasons you shouldn't accept a teaching, which is not because it's the tradition, because my parents accepted it, because the people who follow it look good or whatever. It's like the only reason you should accept it is if it's reasonable. So it's the same thing in terms of his own teaching. I don't think he would have said, but my teaching you don't do that. You just accept it because I taught it. As I said before, if it really is true, that should manifest under scrutiny. It shouldn't be that we can't scrutinize it because that would destroy it because it doesn't withstand scrutiny. Then there's some problem there. So I think that's what Tsongkhapa was encouraging, even though it doesn't. Even if we end up coming to different conclusions about certain things based on having more available evidence, I don't think he would dispute that. It doesn't seem like his approach was to say, and now I figured it out. From now on, nobody else question. You all accept what I said. And it even seems within his lifetime, his ideas developed quite a lot. They got much more solidified in the later generations that kind of settled upon this is what our school accepts. He didn't have that same approach of this is the definitive thing, and now we have all the answers. But now over time it sort of solidified into that. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. No. Okay, so we do the dedication.
was the space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose mind's wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if
I reach this state, may I be held in noble compassion for all my lives, Manjushri.
may I find
May
the
I
best
possess the
of
completed paths of the teachings,
and
may I please all the Buddhas I practice.
using
Skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, clear the darkness from the minds of all beings, the points of the paths as I have discerned them.
May I
Uphold Buddhist teachings for a very long time.
with my
By
heart
going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid.
May the minds of those who wish for
Liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddhist age be nourished for a long time. And by this graded path to enlightenment completed due to the wondrous, virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons.
may all
Human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted any of their lives in the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and notions of prosperity spread everywhere.